The Great Hall of the Galactic Council was built to make visitors feel small. Its ceiling rose so high that clouds sometimes formed near the top. Thousands of lights hung like frozen stars. The walls were made of black stone from a dead planet, polished until they shone like mirrors. 12 species had built this place together, and they were very proud of it. Ambassador Unikim stood at the human podium and looked at the aliens around her. She was a woman in her late 50s with gray hair and calm eyes. She had served Earth for 30 years. She had seen many things in this chamber. Today, she knew, would be different from all the other days. The Morvani sat in the highest seats. They were tall insect creatures with 4 arms and eyes like black diamonds. Their leader, High Counselor Vareth, was older than any human city. He clicked his mouthparts together as he watched the humans below. The Talashi filled the seats to the left. They looked like large gray fish that had learned to walk on land. Their scales caught the light and threw it back in rainbow colors. Legate Orvin was their voice on the council. He was known for his sharp words and his hatred of humans. Today the council would vote on whether humans could become permanent members. For 47 years, humanity had been a provisional member. They had proven themselves again and again. They had shared their medicine. They had given their terraforming machines. They had sent their soldiers to keep peace in dangerous places. Una believed they had earned their place. High Counselor Vareth raised one of his 4 arms. The hall became silent. "We gather to decide the matter of human membership," Vareth said. His voice was like dry leaves rubbing together. "Let those who wish to speak come forward." Legate Orvin rose from his seat. His gray scales rippled as he moved. He walked to the center of the floor with slow, proud steps. "I will speak against the humans," Orvin said. "They are children playing with fire. Their species is barely 10,000 years old. My people were sailing between stars when humans were still living in caves and hitting each other with rocks." Some of the aliens laughed. Una kept her face calm and still. "Yes, humans are clever," Orvin continued. "Too clever. They learn too fast. They change too quickly. Today, they are friendly. Tomorrow, who knows what they will become. They are dangerous, like a fire that has not yet learned to stay in its place." He turned to look directly at Una. "I propose that humans should not be members of this council. Instead, they should serve us. Let them be workers and soldiers under our direction. Let them use their clever hands for our benefit. This is the proper place for such a young and reckless species." More laughter came from the seats. Una saw that many of the delegates were nodding their heads or making similar gestures with their bodies. The vote was called. 7 species voted against human membership. Only 5 voted in favor. The motion failed. High Counselor Vareth looked down at Una. "The council has decided," he said. "Humanity will remain provisional members. Perhaps in another century, you may ask again." Una stood quietly for a long moment. The chamber waited. Some of the delegates expected anger. Some expected tears. Some expected the humans to beg for another chance. Instead, Una smiled. It was a small, sad smile. "I thank the council for making its position clear," she said. Her voice was soft, but it carried to every corner of the Great Hall. "For 47 years, humanity has served this council faithfully. We have given our knowledge, our technology, and our lives to help maintain peace and prosperity in these stars." She paused and looked around the room slowly. "But we have learned something today. We have learned that no matter what we give, it will never be enough. We have learned that this council does not see us as equals. And so, with respect, I must inform you that humanity will withdraw from council space." The silence that followed was complete. Not a single sound came from the thousands of delegates. "Within 90 standard days," Una continued, "all human personnel will return to Terran space. All human technology will be removed. All human support for council operations will end. We wish you well, but we will no longer be a part of this body." Legate Orvin laughed loudly. "You think to threaten us? Go then, little humans. Run back to your tiny corner of the galaxy. We managed for millions of years before you came. We will manage after you leave." Una did not respond to him. She simply bowed to the council and walked toward the exit. Her steps echoed in the silent hall. Up in the observation deck, Admiral Taiho Park was already sending orders to the fleet. His fingers moved quickly across his communication device. Every human ship, every human station, every human outpost received the same message. Begin withdrawal procedures. Young Morvani delegate ran after Yuna before she reached the door. His name was Delegate Nira, and he had voted in favor of humans. His forehands were shaking. "Ambassador, please wait," he said. "You cannot simply leave. Who will maintain the jump gates in the outer reaches? The human engineers are the only ones who understand the quantum systems." Yuna stopped. She turned to look at the young alien. Her eyes were kind, but her words were firm. "That sounds like a council problem now," she said. Then she walked out of the great hall. The doors closed behind her with a sound like a tomb sealing shut in the council chamber. The delegates began to talk among themselves. Some were confused. Some were angry. A few were worried. But most of them believed that the humans were bluffing. Surely they would come back and apologize. Surely they would realize their mistake. Legate Orvine laughed again and returned to his seat. "Good riddance," he said loudly. "Now we can discuss important matters without those primitives interrupting." High Counselor Vareth did not laugh. He sat very still in his high seat. His old eyes watched the door where Yuna had disappeared. He had lived for a very long time. He had seen many things, and something told him that the council had just made a terrible mistake. But he said nothing. He was too proud to admit his fears. And so the council moved on to other business, while 90 days began to count down toward a future none of them could imagine. Dr. Mingi Lee had spent 15 years at the Talashi border station. She had learned their language. She had studied their bodies. She had saved thousands of their lives. Now she was packing her medical equipment into gray metal boxes. The hospital wing was quiet. Most of her staff had already left on earlier transports. Only a few human nurses remained, helping her close down the facility properly. A Talashi official named Prefect Goral came to her office. His gray scales were pale, which meant he was nervous. His round eyes blinked quickly as he looked at the boxes. "Dr. Lee, this is madness," he said. "The treaty clearly states that medical personnel must remain in place during any dispute. You cannot leave." Minji continued packing. She wrapped a delicate scanner in soft cloth and placed it carefully in a box. "The treaty was between equals," she said calmly. "Your council voted that humans are not equals. Therefore, the treaty no longer applies to us, but the patients. We have over 200 beings in this hospital right now. Many of them need treatments that only you understand." Minji stopped and looked at him. Her eyes were sad, but her voice was steady. "I have prepared complete files for every patient. I have written instructions for every treatment. I have trained your doctors as best I could. What happens now is not my responsibility. It is yours." She handed him a data device. "Everything you need is here. I wish your people well, Prefect. I truly do." Goral took the device with trembling hands. He wanted to argue more, but he saw something in the doctor's face that stopped him. She was not being cruel. She was simply done. 300 light-years away. Chief Engineer Junho Han stood in the control room of the Varanthos Gate Network. Around him, dozens of screens showed the status of jump gates across council space. Green lights blinked steadily. Everything was working perfectly. It would not work perfectly for much longer. A group of Morvani technicians entered the control room. They wore the badges of the council's technical division. Their leader, a tall insect with silver markings on his shell, approached Junho. "Chief Engineer Han, we are here to take control of this facility," he said. "You will train us to operate these systems before you leave." Junho looked at him for a long moment. Then he laughed. It was not a mean laugh. It was the laugh of a man who knew something that others did not. "I would be happy to train you," he said. "But it would take about 20 years. That is how long it took me to learn these systems." The Morvani technician clicked his mouth parts in annoyance. "Then give us the access codes. We will figure it out ourselves. The codes are tied to human neural patterns," Junho explained patiently. The quantum cores respond only to human brainwaves. We designed them this way for security. Even if I gave you the codes, the system would not accept your commands. The Morvani stared at him. You cannot be serious. I'm completely serious. These gates were built by humans for humans. We offered many times to share the technology fully, but the Council always refused. They said they did not want to become dependent on human systems. Junho smiled slightly. I suppose that decision is looking different now. He picked up his bag and walked toward the door. The gates will continue to function for about 3 months without maintenance. After that, they will begin to fail. I suggest you find a solution quickly. In the dark spaces between stars, Captain Soyenbeek commanded the patrol cruiser Horizon. For 8 years, her crew had protected trade routes from pirates and raiders. They knew every hiding spot. They knew every trick the criminals used. They were very good at their job. Now they were leaving, Captain. We are receiving distress calls from 3 merchant vessels, her communications officer reported. Raider ships are attacking them in Sector 7. Soyen closed her eyes for a moment. Before today, she would have already been changing course to help. But her orders were clear. Log the distress calls and forward them to the Council Navy, she said. Continue our withdrawal course. Her crew looked at her with troubled eyes. They were soldiers. They wanted to fight. They wanted to help. I know, Soyen said quietly. I feel it too. But we are no longer responsible for Council space. If they wanted our protection, they should have treated us as partners, not as servants. The Horizon continued on its course. Behind them, the screams of dying merchants echoed through the communication channels. One by one, the signals went silent. On Varanthos Prime, Legate Orvin was growing frustrated. Every day brought new reports of problems. Human doctors were leaving. Human engineers were leaving. Human soldiers were leaving. And everywhere they left, things started to go wrong. He called for Ambassador Yuna to meet with him. She came as polite as ever and sat across from him in his office. This has gone far enough, Orvin said. Stop this foolish withdrawal immediately. The Council demands it. Yuna sipped her tea calmly. The Council demanded that we be treated as lesser beings. We are simply doing what you asked. We are stepping aside. We never said you should leave. No, you said we should serve you. But humans do not serve those who despise them. If you do not want us as equals, then you do not want us at all. Orvin slammed his hand on the table. This is blackmail. This is choice, Yuna replied softly. You made yours. Now, we are making ours. That night, High Counselor Vareth secretly contacted Admiral Taiho Park. The old Morvani looked tired. His shell had lost some of its shine. Admiral, I believe there may have been some miscalculations in our recent decision. Vareth said carefully. Perhaps we could discuss a new arrangement. Admiral Taiho listened politely. His face showed nothing. High Counselor, I appreciate your call, he said. But I am afraid that any renegotiation is not possible at this time. The Council made its position very clear. We are simply respecting that decision. Surely there is something we can discuss. There was before the vote now? Now there is only the withdrawal. Taiho paused. Good evening, High Counselor. The connection closed. Vareth sat alone in his dark office, listening to the reports of systems failing across Council space. For the first time in centuries, he felt afraid. 6 months had passed since the humans left. The galaxy was falling apart. The first jump gate failed on a Tuesday. It was a small gate in the outer reaches connecting to minor trading worlds. One moment it was working. The next moment, it simply stopped. A cargo ship that was passing through at that exact second disappeared forever. No one ever found the pieces. 2 weeks later, a second gate failed. Then, a third. Morvani engineers tried everything they knew. They studied the quantum cores. They ran thousands of tests. They understood nothing. The technology was beyond them, just as Chief Engineer Junho had warned. Without the gates, travel times between systems increased by 10 times or more. Trade routes that once took days now took months. Prices for basic goods began to climb higher and higher. On the Talishi homeworld, a sickness was spreading. It was a lung disease that made people cough until they could not breathe. Humans had cured this disease 200 years ago. The medicine was simple and cheap. But the Talishi did not have the formula. Dr. Minji Lee had left all her medical files behind. But the Talishi doctors could not understand them. The files were written in human medical language. The machines that made the medicine needed human parts that no one could find anymore. Thousands died in the first month. Tens of thousands died in the second month. By the sixth month, whole cities were silent. Prefect Goral stood in the empty hospital where Dr. Minji had once worked. The beds were full of the dying. The medicine cabinets were empty. He held the data device she had given him, the one with all the patient files. He had never learned to read it properly. Should have listened, he whispered to no one. We should have been kinder. In the spaces between stars, pirates ruled. Without human patrol ships, the trade routes became hunting grounds. Raiders attacked any vessel they found. They killed the crews and took everything of value. Merchant companies refused to send ships. Insurance companies refused to cover losses. Trade stopped almost completely. Worlds that depended on imported food began to starve. Legate Orvan's own people were among the worst affected. The Talishi had always been traders. They made nothing themselves but bought and sold everything from everyone. Now there was nothing to buy and no one to sell to. His planet had food stores for perhaps 1 year. After that, they would have to eat each other or die. Delegate Nira. The young Morvani, who had supported humans, spent every day gathering information. She built a report showing exactly how much the Council had depended on humans. The numbers were shocking. Humans had maintained 63% of all critical infrastructure. Human doctors had treated 40% of all serious diseases. Human soldiers had stopped 71% of all pirate attacks. Human engineers had designed the communication systems that let different species talk to each other. Nira brought her report to the Council. She stood before the assembled delegates and read the facts in a clear, strong voice. We did not understand what we had, she said. We took their help and gave them nothing but insults in return. We called them children while they held our civilization together. And now, they are gone, and we are falling apart. The Council did not want to hear this. High Counselor Vareth ordered the report to be sealed. Nira was removed from her position and sent home in disgrace. We do not need lessons from traitors who love humans more than their own kind, Vareth said coldly. But even as he spoke, his body trembled. His shell had grown dull and gray. The stress was killing him slowly. At the new Terran border, Commander Hyun-Soo Choi watched the refugee ships arrive. Every day there were more of them. Aliens from every species came begging for entry to human space. They brought stories of famine, disease, and war. A Morvani female with 2 young children pressed her hands against the barrier shield. Her eyes were wet with tears. Please, she begged. My world is dying. The pirates took everything. We have nowhere else to go. Hyun-Soo's heart hurt. He wanted to open the border. He wanted to help them all. But his orders were clear. I am sorry, he said gently. We can give you food and medicine. We can repair your ship. But we cannot let you into Terran space. Not yet. Why? The female cried. We did nothing wrong. We are simple people. We never voted against you. We never hated you. I know, Hyun-Soo said. And I am truly sorry. But these are questions for your council to answer, not me. He turned away before she could see the tears in his own eyes. Back on Varanthos Prime, the council met in emergency session. The great hall that once felt so grand now felt like a tomb. Many seats were empty. Some delegates had died. Others could not travel because the gates were failing. High Counselor Vareth tried to call the session to order, but as he raised his arm, he suddenly gasped. His body shook violently. He collapsed from his high seat and tumbled down the steps. Medical staff rushed forward, but they could do nothing. The equipment they had was human-designed. Without human technicians to maintain it, most of the machines had stopped working months ago. Vareth lay on the cold floor of the chamber. His old eyes looked up at the ceiling with its frozen lights. An aide leaned close to hear his final words. "We should have listened," Vareth whispered. "We were so proud, so foolish. Tell them. Tell them to fix this, before it is too late." And the oldest member of the Galactic Council died on the floor of his own chamber, surrounded by the ruins of everything he had built. Legate Orvin watched the body being carried away. For the first time, he felt something like fear. He had laughed when the humans left. He had called them primitives and children. He had said the galaxy would be better without them. Now he understood the truth. The humans had not needed the Council. The Council had needed the humans. And now, without them, everything was ending. He looked around at the empty seats and the frightened faces. Someone would have to go to Earth and beg for help. Someone would have to admit that the Council had been wrong. Orvin closed his eyes. He knew who that someone would have to be. 1 year after the withdrawal, Legate Orvin stood on Earth for the first time in his life. The planet was beautiful. Green forests covered the mountains. Blue oceans sparkled under a yellow sun. Humans walked everywhere, healthy and happy and free. He had expected to find a small, struggling world. Instead, he found a civilization that was growing stronger every day. While the Council fell apart, humanity had flourished. Orvin was not treated badly. He was given a clean room in an ordinary hotel. The bed was comfortable. The food was good, but he was made to wait. For 3 days, no one from the Terran government came to see him. He sat in his room and watched the news. He saw reports of the chaos in Council space. He saw images of starving aliens and burning cities. He saw everything that his pride had caused. On the 4th day, a young aide came to collect him. She was polite, but not friendly. She led him through long hallways to a simple meeting room. There was no ceremony. There was no grand welcome. Just a table and some chairs. President Yunji Kong entered the room quietly. She was a small woman with sharp eyes and silver hair. She had led the Terran Coalition for 12 years. She sat down across from Orvin and looked at him without speaking. Orvin felt very small under her gaze. He remembered all the things he had said about humans. He remembered calling them primitives and children. He remembered laughing when they left. "Legate Orvin," the president said finally. "Why are you here?" He had prepared a long speech. He had practiced it on the journey to Earth, but now, looking into her eyes, all the fancy words left him. "I am here to beg," he said simply. "My people are dying. All the Council species are dying. We cannot survive without your help." President Yunji nodded slowly. "I have read the reports. The situation is very bad. It is worse than the reports say," Orvin admitted. "Civil wars have started between member species. We are fighting over the last scraps of food and medicine. In another year, there may be no Council left at all. And what do you want from us? Everything. Anything. Whatever you will give us. We will accept any terms. We will sign any treaty. Just please, help us." President Yunji leaned back in her chair. She did not smile. She did not gloat. She simply looked tired. "I have advisors who tell me we should let the Council burn," she said. "They remind me of every insult, every dismissal, every time we were treated like animals. They say you deserve what is happening." Orvin lowered his head. "They are not wrong. Oh, they are not. But I also have other advisors. People like Ambassador Unikim. People who believe that vengeance serves no one. What does Ambassador Una say?" The president stood and walked to the window. Outside, the sun was setting over a garden full of flowers. "She says we should help, but on our terms, not as servants. Not as provisional members, as equals. True equals, we will agree to anything," Orvin said quickly. "You say that now? But here's what we actually want." President Yunji turned to face him. "The Galactic Council must dissolve. Completely. It must end." Orvin's mouth fell open. "Dissolve? But the Council has existed for 10,000 years. And for 10,000 years it has treated younger species like dirt. That must end. In its place, We will build something new. A galactic assembly where every species has an equal voice. No more provisional memberships. No more waiting centuries for respect. The other species will never agree, and they will die, President Yunji said simply. We are not asking for much, Legate. We are asking for fairness. We are asking for the basic dignity that every thinking being deserves. If your council cannot provide that, then your council has no right to exist. Orvin sat in silence for a long time. He thought about his people, starving on distant worlds. He thought about the dead floating in space. He thought about High Counselor Vareth, dying on the floor of the Great Hall. He had no choice. He never really had a choice. The humans had won without firing a single shot. They had simply walked away and let the truth speak for itself. Except, he said quietly, I will return to Varanthos Prime and tell them. The council will vote to dissolve. President Yunji nodded. Good. Our ships will follow you with food and medicine. But remember this, Legate. We are doing this because we choose to be merciful, not because we must be. Do not make us regret that mercy. Orvin rose and bowed deeply. It was a gesture he had never made to any non-Talashi in his life. I understand, he said, and I am sorry. For everything. 1 month later, the Galactic Council met for the last time. The Great Hall was less than half full. So many delegates had died or could not travel. The walls still shone like mirrors, but now they reflected only sadness. Legate Orvin stood at the center podium. His scales had turned from gray to almost white. He looked like a ghost of the proud creature he had once been. I call for a vote, he said. His voice was weak but clear. A vote to dissolve the Galactic Council and accept the terms offered by the Terran Coalition. There were some protests. A few delegates shouted angry words, but most of them simply sat in exhausted silence. They knew there was no other way. The vote was called. 11 species voted in favor. 1 species voted against, but only out of pure stubbornness. The motion passed. The Galactic Council, which had ruled the stars for 10,000 years, officially ceased to exist in the observation gallery.
Ow.
Delegate Nira watched with tears streaming down her face. The Morvani female beside her looked confused. Why are you crying? She asked. We have just destroyed everything our ancestors built. Nira wiped her eyes, but could not stop the tears. I am crying because we finally learned, she said. I am crying because we finally understood what the humans tried to teach us all along. What did they teach us? Nira looked out at the empty seats in the dark chamber. That respect is not a gift you give to those who have proven themselves. It is a right that belongs to everyone. And when you deny that right, you destroy yourself. 5 years had passed since the old council died. The galaxy was healing. The Galactic Assembly met on Earth for its 5th anniversary summit. Delegates from every species filled the new hall. It was smaller than the old council chamber on Varanthos Prime, but it felt warmer. The walls were made of wood and glass, not cold black stone. Sunlight poured through the windows. Secretary General Yuna Kim stood at the central podium. Her hair had turned completely white now, but her eyes were still sharp and kind. She had been chosen to lead the new assembly by a vote of all member species. She was the first human to hold such a position. 5 years ago, we stood at the edge of destruction, she said to the assembled delegates. Today, we stand at the beginning of something new. Something better. The jump gates were working again. Human engineers had returned to council space, but this time they brought alien students with them. Young Morvani and Talashi, and beings from every species, learned the quantum systems side by side. The knowledge was being shared, not hoarded. The diseases were under control. Human doctors had rebuilt the hospitals, but now they trained local physicians in everything they knew. No more secrets. No more depending on one species alone. The pirates were gone. A joint fleet protected the trade routes, with captains and crews from every member world. They flew under a new flag that belonged to everyone. Dr. Mingy Lee had returned to the Talashi border station. The same hospital where she had once packed her bags in sadness was now full of life again. Her former patients came to embrace her when she arrived. They held her hands and wept with joy. A plaque hung on the wall near the entrance. It was written in 7 languages. It said, "In memory of those we lost, and in honor of those who came back." Prefect Goral, older now, and gray around his scales, brought her flowers from his garden. "We were fools," he said, "but you came back anyway." "Why?" Mingy smiled and placed the flowers in water. "Because sick people need doctors," she said simply. "It was never about politics for me. It was always about helping." Chief Engineer Junho Han now directed the largest training program in galactic history. Thousands of young aliens came to learn the quantum systems. He taught them patiently, just as his teachers had taught him. In 20 years, he told his students, "You will not need us anymore. You will run these gates yourselves. And when new species join the assembly, you will teach them, just as we taught you." That is how civilizations grow. Captain Soyenbeek commanded the flagship of the Joint Fleet. Her bridge crew was a mix of species that would have seemed impossible 5 years ago. A Morvani served as her first officer. A Talashi managed communications. Humans worked beside aliens, who had once called them primitives. "Captain," her Morvani, first officer, said one day, "may I ask you something personal?" "Of course," Soyen replied. "When the Council rejected your people, you could have destroyed us. Your technology was superior. Your fleets were stronger. Why did you simply leave? Why not conquer us?" Soyen thought for a moment. "Because that is not who we are," she said. "We wanted partners, not slaves. If we had conquered you, we would have become exactly what you accused us of being. We would have proven you right. Instead, you proved us wrong. Yes, and now look at us, working together as equals. This is better than any empire." Ambassador Nira, as she was now called, served as the Morvani representative to the assembly. She had become humanity's strongest ally. She spoke often about the old days, reminding her people of the mistakes they had made. "We must never forget," she told them, "not to punish ourselves, but to make sure we never repeat those errors. Pride nearly destroyed us. Humility saved us." Former Legate Orvin had retired from public life. He lived in a small house on his homeworld, far from the centers of power. He spent his days teaching young Talishi about history. What was the Council's greatest mistake? A student asked him one day. Orvin, old and faded, looked out his window at the stars. "We thought age meant wisdom," he said. "We thought being old made us better than those who were young. But the humans showed us that wisdom has nothing to do with how many years you have lived. It has to do with how you treat others. Do you regret what happened?" "Every day," Orvin admitted. "But I also see what grew from that tragedy. A better galaxy. A fairer system. Perhaps some things must be destroyed before they can be rebuilt correctly." On Earth, Secretary General Yune finished her anniversary speech. She did not gloat. She did not remind the delegates of past wrongs. She spoke only of the future. "There are new species waiting at the edges of known space," she said. "Beings we have never met. When they come to us, we will welcome them as equals. We will not make them prove themselves for centuries. We will not treat them as children. We will extend our hands in friendship from the very first moment. That is the promise of this assembly. That is the lesson we have learned. Every thinking being deserves respect. Every voice deserves to be heard. Together, we are stronger than any of us alone." Ambassador Nira rose from her seat and began to clap. One by one, every delegate in the hall stood and joined her. The applause rolled like thunder through the chamber. Admiral Taiho Park watched from the observation deck. He was old now, with white hair and a cane to help him walk, but his eyes were still bright. A young officer stood beside him. "Admiral, what are you thinking?" Taiho smiled. He watched the delegates cheering. He watched species that had once hated each other now standing side by side. "I am thinking that they finally understand," he said quietly. "Humanity never wanted to rule the galaxy. We never wanted to dominate or control. We only wanted one simple thing." "What was that, sir?" "To be respected." The old admiral looked up at the stars visible through the glass ceiling. "And now, after all this time, we finally are." Down in the hall, Secretary General Yuna caught Admiral Taiho's eye. She gave him a small nod and a smaller smile. He nodded back. The galaxy was at peace. The wounds were healing. And somewhere in the vast darkness of space, all new species were looking up at the stars, wondering what was out there. They would find a galaxy that was ready to welcome them. A galaxy that had learned the hard way that respect is not earned through time or power. It is given freely because it is right. The humans had taught that lesson without a single war. They had simply stepped aside and let the truth speak for itself. And in the end, the truth was louder than any weapon ever made.